Hey guys, tonight we trudge back to a world where the air tastes of dust and the weight of empire feels like an ancient cloak, heavy and frayed at the edges. You're born into a Byzantine empire teetering on the brink, its glory days flickering like a candle about to be snuffed out by wind and war. The streets of Constantinople buzz with whispers of change, but you probably won't survive this empire's relentless storms, let alone shape its future. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I'm curious where this story is reaching you from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive into this world in 575 AD, a time when Byzantium clings to its ancient heritage, yet faces mounting threats from every direction. Your family, of Armenian and Cappadocian roots, is no stranger to the shifting sands of power. Your father, Heraclius the Elder, commands armies in Africa, while your mother's side boasts military honor. Even as a child, you feel the pulse of a world caught between fading Roman grandeur and the darkening shadow of Persia. The city around you, Constantinople, is a dazzling jewel built on 7 hills, with marble columns and golden mosaics sparkling under the Mediterranean sun. But beneath its beauty lurk tensions that could crumble empires, religious discord, political betrayals, and looming wars. You learn early that being imperial blood means wearing armor made not just of iron, but of suspicion and expectation. Stories whisper in palace halls about the last Roman who will save or doom the empire. Spoiler alert, historians still argue whether your birth was a blessing or a curse for Byzantium's fate. Meanwhile, you start mastering languages, Latin's imperial prestige fading as Greek murmurs rise through the forums and markets, setting the stage for your own cultural revolution. As you grow, you witness Byzantine soldiers drilling in armor heavy enough to crush your enthusiasm, but necessary to defend fragile borders. You watch merchants trade silks and spices, and philosophers debate theological disputes that seem less about faith and more about power. This cacophony of ambition and anxiety becomes the soundtrack of your youth, preparing you unknowingly for a future where every decision will be a tightrope walk between salvation and ruin. You're no longer just a boy watching from the sidelines. You're a young man wielding a spear in the dusty outposts of Cappadocia, where the horizon seems endless and your dreams even bigger. The year is 595, and you've been sent to Illyricum, a rugged borderland where soldiers squat by campfires and share tales thick with grit and glory. Your spear may be humble, but it points toward a destiny sharper than any sword. You trudge through mud and morning mist. The clang of armor and the scent of horse sweat your constant companions. The army's camp is a world in miniature wooden buckets clatter. Scouts return with urgent whispers, and the crackling fires cast dancing shadows on weathered faces. Your life is a patchwork of drills, dusty marches, and stolen moments of laughter, with comrades who joke that someday you'll be the one ordering them around. You're learning quickly that loyalty here is as shifting as the wind today's friend might be tomorrow's rival. While the empire still reveres Rome's ancient glories, the reality on the ground is raw and brutal. Petty commanders squabble, supplies run thin, and every dawn could bring an ambush or a letter from the capital, demanding more troops. It's a crucible that burns away any naive notions you once held. Yet amid the mud and blood, you dream not just of survival, but of greatness. Your spear feels lighter in your hands when you imagine standing before the emperor, not as a soldier, but as a leader. You watch the distant peaks of the Balkans and wonder if your fate lies beyond, in the heart of an empire, begging for salvation. And while others sneer at your ambition, you harbor a secret weapon, a mind sharp enough to see through the chaos, and a stubborn heart ready to endure what others won't. Here's a fun tidbit. You actually carried a small charm made of amber, believed to ward off evil spirits, because hey, who doesn't want a little supernatural help in dodging arrows? Scholars still argue whether this charm was a mere superstition or a symbol of your unique blend of military pragmatism and spiritual resilience. Either way, it's a reminder that your journey blends the mystical with the mundane, the gritty with the grand. As the sun sets over the rugged camp, you tighten your grip on your spear and prepare for the battles ahead. Battles not just against enemies, but against the tide of history itself. This is no longer just about a boy with a spear. It's about a future emperor, carving his path through a crumbling world. You find yourself suddenly thrust into the blinding glow of imperial favor, the kind that smells faintly of polished marble and hidden daggers. It's the year 610, and the throne creaks under Emperor Phocas, a man whose reign is as unstable as a house of cards in a storm. But you, Heraclius, are catching the eye of the emperor's opponents, and more importantly, of his heir apparent. When your sharp mind and steady hand in command become known, whispers start to swirl, like autumn leaves in the palace corridors. You are summoned, not as a soldier, but as a commander, entrusted with the fate of the Eastern Roman Empire's armies. The weight of the purple cloak is heavy, even if you've yet to wear it. Walking the marbled halls of Constantinople, you sense the cold whispers beneath the grand mosaics and the endless plots that coil around every banquet table. Loyalty here is a currency more fragile than gold. You learn quickly that promotions often come with a dagger in the back. Sometimes, literally, your instincts sharpen. Watch the smiles closely. Count the pauses in conversation. And never trust a man who offers too many compliments. You're no stranger to suspicion. But the real challenge is using it to your advantage without becoming the very thing you dread. You're not just fighting barbarians beyond the walls anymore. You're navigating a court where alliances shift faster than the tides of the Bosporus. Here, every gesture, every word, is a move on a deadly chessboard. You've started speaking Greek more fluently, a political act as much as a cultural one, and it feels like pulling a thread that might unravel the old Latin order. This language shift is more than practical, it's symbolic. A quiet revolution in the empire's heart, a quirky detail during one tense audience. You supposedly wore a cloak so heavy with gold thread that courtiers joked it weighed more than your army. The story might be exaggerated. Historians still debate if it was a real fashion statement or just palace gossip, but it paints a picture of how out of place you must have seemed among the old guard. As you stand before the emperor, your heart steadies. This is your moment. Your chance to wield power, not just on the battlefield, but in the deadly game of imperial politics. You can almost hear the silent question echoing. Will you survive the court as you did the war? You trudge through the noisy streets of Constantinople, where the scent of roasting chestnuts mingles with the distant rumble of chariot wheels, and prepare to face a crowd more ferocious than any army 30. Zero enraged citizens rioting in the Hippodrome during the infamous Nika uprising. The air crackles with tension. Every shout, a promise of violence. And you're tasked with a brutal job: crush the rebellion without turning the city into ruins. The chariot races were supposed to be mere entertainment, a release valve for popular anger. But they've exploded into something far deadlier. You steel yourself, knowing you're walking into a tempest where one wrong move could mean your death, and not just politically, As you marshal the Imperial troops, the chaos feels surreal, a riot that turns the city's heart into a battleground. With chants echoing off ancient stone and banners torn in the frenzy, you're not just a general, you're a referee in a fight between blue and green factions. But with lives on the line, amid the shouts and smoke, you glimpse a young noblewoman hiding in the crowd, clutching a small wooden icon, her eyes wide with terror, a reminder that real people, not just angry mobs, suffer in civil war. You're ordered to be ruthless, but precise, a paradox that demands finesse under pressure. Your forces storm the hippodrome, swords flashing and shields clashing, silencing the riot with a grim efficiency. It's a day soaked in blood and dust, and the city holds its breath as order is brutally restored. The Emperor watches from his balcony, but you know the real power lies with the people, and their anger does not die easily. A curious anecdote legend has it you once used the Emperor's favorite racehorse as a kind of psychological warfare, parading it before the rioters to remind them of imperial strength, whether true or just palace myth. It's one of those stories that makes you wonder how much theatre was involved in these deadly events. Historians still argue whether your actions quelled the rebellion for good or simply planted seeds for future unrest. But one thing is certain, you proved you could control chaos with a firm hand and an iron will. The city might never truly trust you, but they respect you. You find yourself aboard a creaking ship, bound for Carthage, the salty air stinging your face as the waves slap against the hull, carrying you and a ragtag force of barely 15 men into the heart of Africa. The Vandal kingdom awaits a realm once feared, now seemingly vulnerable, but don't let the numbers fool you. This isn't a stroll through the countryside, it's a gamble with destiny, where every grain of sand could conceal a threat. Every palm tree might hide an enemy scout. You steady yourself, feeling the weight of an empire's hopes on your shoulders, as the coast comes into view like a mirage shimmering over the sea. Your men chatter nervously, clutching worn shields and rusty spears. But there's an electric buzz of anticipation in the air. This campaign is about more than conquest. It's a chance to rewrite history, to snatch glory from the hands of a fading enemy. You marvel at the exotic landscape, golden dunes, merging with turquoise waters, and ancient ruins, whispering forgotten secrets, while plotting your next moves. The stakes feel enormous, but so does your resolve. A little-known fact, some of your soldiers reportedly used dried locusts as a food source during the journey, a survival tactic that would raise a few eyebrows at the imperial banquet tables. The choice between hunger and crunchy insects is a reminder that war is rarely glamorous. As your feet finally touch Carthaginian soil, you can't shake the feeling that the real battle isn't just against the Vandals, but also against time, desert heat, and dwindling supplies. Historians still debate how much luck versus strategy secured your swift victory here. But either way, you've just taken the first step towards Section 6 U Street, and beneath the blistering African sun, eyes scanning the horizon as you outmaneuver Gelimer, the Vandal king, who's as slippery as desert sand slipping through your fingers. His forces are scattered like tumbleweeds caught in a storm, some deserting in whispers under moonlight, others betraying loyalties for the gleam of Roman gold. You juggle these treacheries with the precision of a master strategist, orchestrating swift strikes and feints that keep your opponents guessing and your own lines unbroken. Your men, battle-worn but spirited, look to you as the embodiment of hope amid the chaos. There's a surreal heroism in the way you move calm and confident, while the desert wind carries the scent of dust and distant fires. Your armor, polished but battle-scarred, reflects the relentless sun as you prepare to deliver the final blows. You've turned a chaotic betrayal buffet into a feast of victory, though the cost weighs heavily in silent moments. Sometimes, you wonder if history will remember the faces lost beneath those scorching skies, or just the tales of your triumph. Oddly enough, local Berber tribes reportedly mistook you for a deity, an illusion fueled by your uncanny ability to appear and vanish like a mirage. Whether true or not, it adds a mythical layer to your legend, blending fact and folklore like a medieval tapestry. Still, historians argue whether your cunning or sheer luck tipped the scales in this desert campaign. Regardless, you have etched your name into the sands of Africa and the annals of empire. You return to Constantinople, the city of gleaming marble and whispering corridors. Hailed as a hero, but wrapped in an uneasy cloak of suspicion, the celebrations feel grander than the last. But the cold echoes in the vast halls remind you that glory is a fickle companion. The marble beneath your feet is as smooth as the smiles of courtiers who praise you by day and murmur doubts by night. Your growing popularity becomes a double-edged sword, while the people chant your name. The palace shadows deepen with envy and political scheming. You trudge through familiar streets, the scent of fresh bread mingling with the distant clang of armor. Yet you cannot shake the feeling of being watched. Your triumphs in Africa have made you a symbol of imperial restoration, but also a target for those who fear your rising influence. You catch fragments of whispered rumors, half caught like leaves in a breeze, suggesting that some see your successes as eclipsing the emperor's own glory. You remember the delicate silk of your ceremonial robes, heavier now, with the weight of expectation and unease. Quirky as it sounds, some palace gossips claim you have a secret admirer among the servants, an old woman who leaves mysterious herbs and cryptic notes at your door, perhaps a blessing or a curse. Such stories blend into the tapestry of court life, where truth often hides behind layers of myth and rumor. Historians still debate whether your reception at Constantinople was genuinely warm or merely a polished performance masking deeper resentments. Either way, you stand at the center of a delicate dance between honor and danger. Your every move watched like a game of chess, with stakes higher than the empire itself. You set sail once again, the salty breeze biting at your face as your fleet cuts through the restless waves toward Italy, the stage of the endless Gothic War. The empire you strive to rebuild feels more like a fragile dream, held together by worn threads and fading loyalties. Your soldiers, a mix of weary veterans and fresh recruits, share the same grim determination etched on your own face. This campaign might just be the empire's last gasp or its rebirth. As the shoreline of Italy draws nearer, volcanic ash from distant eruptions dusts the air, a ghostly reminder of nature's quiet power amid human chaos. You trudge through ancient temples and crumbling ruins, where echoes of forgotten gods seem to watch your every step. Your strategy blends diplomacy and brute force, offering bribes to wary city leaders while wielding the sword when words fail. Sicily, with its sun-bleached stones and shadowed groves, becomes a chessboard where you maneuver carefully, trying to win hearts with fewer battles and more cunning. Your mind drifts to the strange superstition among your troops that carrying a piece of volcanic rock wards off bad luck. Who knows if it's true? But it keeps morale ticking like clockwork. You can almost hear the whispered jokes about your volcanic charm, a nickname that somehow sticks despite your serious demeanor. Historians still argue whether your Sicilian campaign was a masterstroke of statesmanship or just a desperate bid to hold the empire's crumbling edges. Either way, You press on, knowing that the fate of Rome itself may hinge on your stubborn resolve. Naples stand defiant, its ancient walls guarding secrets and stubborn pride alike. You find yourself facing a city that refuses to bow, its citizens buzzing with fierce loyalty and whispered threats. Conventional siege tactics feel like banging your head against a stone wall. So you turn to something more psychological. Ghostly voices echo through the aqueducts at night. Strange sounds that unsettle even the hardiest guards. Whispers that make the shadows twitch and the air thicken with fear. Your soldiers, though skeptical, play along with the eerie chorus, carrying lanterns and banging drums to add to the city's growing unease. The residents murmur about curses and spirits, and slowly, the stalwart defense begins to fray. It's an unorthodox weapon war psychology, born from desperation and creativity, forcing Naples to reconsider its stance. You watch from a quiet corner as the city's leaders send envoys to discuss terms, the tension easing like a held breath finally released. Amid this strange campaign, one of your generals swears he once saw a cat with glowing eyes, stalking the battlements, probably just a trick of the light. But tales like that spread fast, and make the nights a little longer for everyone. You chuckle quietly to yourself, remembering how superstition often fills the spaces where hope runs thin. Historians still debate the effectiveness of these spectral tactics, some calling it clever bluff, others mere coincidence, cloaked in fear. Whatever the truth, Naples' surrender feels like a small victory carved from the shadows of uncertainty. Another step in your relentless push toward reclaiming the empire's heart. You stand before the gates of Rome, the eternal city's grandeur both inspiring and daunting as your weary army prepares for the siege. The once mighty walls, scarred by centuries of conflict, seem to whisper tales of glory and downfall, while your supply lines stretch thin, tangled like forgotten threads of an old tapestry. The city, though battered, is alive with stubborn defenders, and you feel the weight of history pressing down as much as the crushing fatigue in your bones. Your soldiers camp beneath the flickering stars, sharing meager meals and whispered fears, their faces a mix of hope and exhaustion. You catch the faint scent of rosemary and damp stone, reminders that even here, life clings stubbornly. Each day, you push against the gates with everything you have, aware that the prize is as much symbolic as strategic, the heart of an empire slipping through time. Behind the scenes, the logistics gnaw at you more than the enemy's arrows. Food dwindles, illnesses spread quietly, and morale teeters like a candle flame in the wind. You try to bolster spirits with tales of past victories and promises of glory, but even your iron resolve has cracks. At night, the distant sounds of battle mix with the soft murmur of prayer and the rustling of cloaks, weaving a complex symphony of war and faith. There's a strange irony here. The city's splendor is both your goal and a cruel reminder of the empire's fragility. Scholars still argue whether your grasp on Rome was ever truly secure, or if it was more a fleeting dream, held together by desperation. For now, you hold fast, knowing that history watches silently, waiting to. The siege grinds on with a mix of endurance and despair. Scurvy creeps into your ranks, a silent killer far deadlier than enemy arrows. While famine gnaws at the city walls themselves, you trudge through the stench of desperation, watching as once vibrant soldiers grow gaunt, their laughter replaced by bitter silence. Inside Rome, the people suffer in equal measure. The grand marble halls, echoing with the hollow sound of empty stomachs and fading hope. You find yourself both commander and reluctant witness to this slow unraveling, the weight of responsibility heavy on your shoulders like a stone tunic. Despite the grim conditions, a sharp wit and dry humor become your weapons against the creeping madness. You joke about how the Goths outside probably envy your diet of stale bread and thin broth. Your men whisper about you with a mix of respect and disbelief. You remain calm, even as the city's fate teeters on a knife's edge. Historians still argue whether your steadfastness here saved the empire or merely postponed its inevitable fall. But you carry on, steeling yourself against despair like armor forged in fire. Each day brings new challenges, skirmishes, flare beyond the walls. The clash of sword and shield, a harsh counterpoint to the quiet suffering inside. You keep your eyes on the horizon, knowing that relief could come, or that this siege could become a tomb. The irony of holding the eternal city while feeling so humanly vulnerable isn't lost on you. As the twilight descends and you ponder the fragile thread by which empires hang, the Gothic counterpunch hits, just as your weary forces begin to stagger. Totila's army crashing against your defenses like relentless waves on a battered shore. You taste the dust kicked up by their hooves. Hear the clash of steel, mingling with desperate cries, a brutal symphony you can neither ignore nor escape. Your men fight with the stubbornness of those who have nothing left to lose. But even their courage wavers under the weight of exhaustion and dwindling supplies. You move among them, a steady presence, rallying spirits with quiet words, and a grim smile that says, "We may be battered, but we are not broken." There's a strange camaraderie born from shared suffering and mutual hatred of the enemy. Jokes about Totila's fashion sense. Some say he looked like a philosopher lost in a pyromaniac's body. Help lighten the mood. Even if just for a moment, you're both general and jester, trying to keep your men from slipping into despair or madness. Historians still argue whether this counterattack was a turning point or simply another brutal delay in the inevitable. But for you, it's a fight for every breath and every inch of ground. The day stretches on with brutal skirmishes, and nightfall offers no true respite, only eerie quiet pierced by the occasional distant scream. You wonder how long you can keep the line before the city, and perhaps your own spirit finally breaks. It's a grim dance of survival, with the ghosts of past victories haunting every corner and the sharp sting of betrayal never far behind. The siege finally lifts, but only just like a breath snatched in the nick of time before drowning. You watch as the battered remnants of Totila's forces retreat, their banners torn and spirits frayed. Yet their threat remains far from vanquished. Your victory feels fragile, a mere pause in an ongoing storm, and you realize just how relentless this Gothic adversary truly is. Each new wave of attacks brings fresh horror, testing your resolve and forcing you to stretch your weary forces thinner than ever. You try to rest, but the pounding in your temples and the constant whisper of danger keep sleep just out of reach. You gather your commanders, poring over maps and battle reports by flickering candlelight, the shadows on the walls dancing like the ghosts of fallen soldiers. Plans are made, revised, and debated, an endless cycle of hope and despair. Your mind drifts briefly to the scholars, who still argue whether this siege was a strategic masterpiece or a costly stalemate. But you don't have time for debates tonight. Your focus narrows to the lives depending on your decisions, the fragile thread holding the city's fate. Amid the grim calculations, you notice small acts of humanity, a soldier sharing his meager rations with a comrade, a nurse humming softly as she tends to the wounded, and the quiet prayers whispered before battle. These moments offer a strange comfort, reminders that, even in the darkest times, the human spirit clings stubbornly to hope. You carry that hope forward, knowing the fight is far from over, and every day could be your last. Just when you think the weight of the war might finally break you, reinforcements arrive, though not quite the cavalry you'd hoped for. New troops, fresh faces in worn armor, parade onto the scene, their banners fluttering with the promise of aid. But the reality is messier. Officially, these new forces mean joint victories and shared glory. But behind closed doors, the credit feels like a game of political hot potato. You try to rally your weary men and coordinate efforts, but the chain of command twists under bureaucratic claws, turning your triumphs into team efforts on paper while you carry the real scars. Your personal thoughts wander to the countless times you've held the line, wondering if these fresh-faced soldiers understand the blood and bone it took to get here. The city streets still echo with the cries of battle, and you're haunted by the shadows of those who didn't make it this far. You start noticing the subtle shifts in your own circle, whispers, sideways glances, and veiled critiques that sting worse than enemy arrows. Loyalty feels thinner than the frayed edges of your cloak. In the midst of this, a bizarre rumor surfaces. Some say the reinforcements bring not just soldiers, but secret envoys, with strange gifts and mysterious agendas, stirring suspicion and paranoia. Historians still argue whether these political machinations helped or hindered your cause. But you have no choice but to play the game, gritting your teeth through each delicate maneuver. Despite the chaos, you cling to one stubborn truth: the fight isn't over yet. Your gaze sharpens, your mind hones in on the next move. Because in war, the real victory lies in endurance, not just the battles won on any single day. You soon realize this war isn't just fought with swords and spears, but with the cunning of chess masters, and sadly, your pieces are vanishing one by one. Allies you trusted falter under pressure, their loyalty shifting like the sand in a desert storm, while friends you counted on defect to the other side with quiet smiles and sharper daggers. Each betrayal stings like a cold wind, chipping away at your resolve, leaving you scrambling to adapt to a battlefield littered with empty promises and broken oaths. The lines between friend and foe blur, and you become a player in a deadly game of political intrigue, where every alliance feels like a fragile truce waiting to shatter. Negotiations turn into elaborate dances of half-truths and veiled threats, and you start to see the war not just as a contest of armies, but as a contest of wills, patience, and subtle cruelty. Your mind races, calculating each move. While your heart aches for simpler times, remember that crocodile dung sunscreen. This is anything but simple. On the battlefield, and you keep pushing forward, but behind the scenes, the chessboard looks increasingly empty, your few remaining pieces guarded with desperation. Historians still argue whether these betrayals doomed the campaign from the start, or merely complicated an already impossible mission. Whatever the truth, you're left to navigate a labyrinth of shifting loyalties that tests every ounce of your cunning and endurance. And yet, amidst the shadows of treachery, your determination doesn't waver. You steel yourself to play the game, knowing full well the stakes not just a war, but the survival of an empire hanging by a thread. You face Totila, the Gothic king, who's as much a philosopher as a pyromaniac, charming crowds with poetic speeches before lighting their homes ablaze. His charisma is almost hypnotic, and you find yourself both respecting and despising this rival who blends words with wildfire, The battlefield becomes a theater where sharp tongues and sharper swords clash, and every encounter with Totila is a dangerous game of psychological warfare. You study his moves, trying to predict where the next city will burn or which promise will turn to ash. Despite his destructive streak, Totila commands loyalty through sheer force of personality, a reminder that sometimes leadership is less about laws and more about stories told by the firelight. You grit your teeth as his armies strike swiftly, yet you manage to hold your ground, turning each battle into a tense chess match, where survival depends on anticipating his next twist. His penchant for mixing philosophy with war is bizarre but effective, leaving your generals scratching their heads while your soldiers steel themselves for the next inferno. You also notice how Totila's tactics unsettle even your staunchest allies, feeding rumors and doubts that spread like wildfire themselves. In the murky world of war, you learn that defeating a man like Totila requires more than brute strength. It demands cunning, patience, and an understanding of the power behind words. Historians still debate whether Totila's charisma was a genuine leadership gift or just a mask for ruthless ambition. But for you, it's an ever-present challenge you must overcome. As you prepare for another round of battles, you remind yourself that this is no ordinary war. It's a clash of wills, philosophies, and fiery tempers, where every victory feels like a fragile candle flickering in the wind. Negotiating peace with Totila feels like walking a tightrope stretched over a pit of vipers. Every promise and truce comes wrapped in suspicion, with more backstabbing than a dinner party. With knives hidden under the table, you shuffle through the negotiations, knowing that false peace is just a pause before the next storm. As assassination plots swirl around like ghosts, every whisper could mean a dagger aimed at your back. And not even the palace cat escapes the paranoia. Your court feels less like a seat of power and more like a spider's web, sticky with deceit and tangled loyalties. You try to read the shifting alliances, the veiled threats, and the subtle games of betrayal that define this stage of the war, where words carry the weight of swords and smiles hide venom. Yet, amid this chaos, you find yourself relying on old instincts and sharp wit, dodging dangers both on the battlefield and behind velvet curtains. The art of diplomacy becomes as crucial as military strategy, as you juggle fragile truces that seem destined to shatter. There's a peculiar irony in negotiating peace while planning for renewed conflict. The truces feel like lullabies sung to restless children who know the nightmare is just a breath away. You become keenly aware that the political dance is never about genuine harmony. It's about buying time, testing resolve, and exposing cracks in your opponent's armor. Historians still debate whether these truces were merely tactical pauses, or if anyone truly sought peace amidst the chaos. As the tension thickens, you remember that in this game of shadows, trusting the wrong smile can be as deadly as any sword stroke, so you sharpen your senses and brace for the next move in a war where peace is just another battlefield. Your life turns into a dizzying carousel of recalls, exiles, and reinstatements, a bureaucratic roller coaster where loyalty is a ticket that gets punched, shredded, and handed back with less respect than a used scroll. One day, you're hailed as the Empire's savior. The next, you're banished like yesterday's trash, blamed for failures no one else dares claim. It's a dizzying pattern that could give any sane person whiplash, but you've developed a steel spine, hardened by endless political games and court intrigues that seem designed to make you question your own reflection. You trudge between fronts like a ghost haunting a crumbling palace, never quite sure if your next command will be a chance to shine or a setup for downfall. The factions at court treat you like a chess piece, moving you here and there, hoping to control the board, without admitting you might just be the best player around. Historians still argue whether this cycle of exile and return was a product of Justinian's paranoia, or simply the messy politics of an empire struggling to hold itself together. Despite the chaos, you keep your wits sharp, your eyes peeled for enemies both seen and unseen. You learn to read the room, or rather, and the throne room where whispers carry more weight than imperial decrees, and where allies can vanish overnight, replaced by new rivals eager to prove their loyalty by stabbing you in the back. Your resilience becomes legendary, a testament to a man who refuses to be erased, even when the empire itself seems to be crumbling around him. Through it all, you realize that survival in the Byzantine court requires more than military skill. It demands a delicate balance of cunning, patience, and an unshakable sense of self. You're a survivor, not just of wars abroad, but of endless battles at home, where the deadliest weapon is suspicion, and the only safe place is often nowhere at all. You find yourself sent eastward, to the daunting Persian frontier, a region where the sands shift not only beneath your feet, but also beneath the empire's fragile grasp. The war with Persia, that ancient rival whose borders have long been etched in blood and smoke, beckons once again. It's a fresh conflict, but one that feels more like a punishment than a promotion, less a call to glory, and more a test of endurance, with fewer resources and thinner support than you had back west. The eastern lands are harsh and unforgiving, a stark contrast to the fading marble grandeur of Constantinople's palaces, where intrigue gnaws at your reputation like a persistent rat. You trudge through dusty encampments and fortress ruins, where local allies are scarce, and desertion lurks like a shadow in the night. The Persian armies are formidable, seasoned in desert warfare, and led by commanders who know these lands like the back of their hands. The battles are brutal, with scorching days that seem to bake your hopes into dust and cold nights that chill even your fiercest warriors. As you push forward, you learn that this war will test more than your sword arm. It will challenge your ability to command loyalty in the face of isolation. Historians still argue whether your Eastern campaign was a strategic necessity or a desperate diversion by an empire stretched too thin. Some say it was the inevitable price of Justinian's overreach. Others suggest it was a way to keep you occupied and out of the capital's scheming eyes. Whatever the truth, you know that every victory here feels hollow, without the backing you once took for granted. Your troops grow weary, and the line between friend and foe blurs as local tribes shift allegiances like the wind. But you hold firm, embodying the relentless spirit of a general who refuses to let the empire's eastern gates fall quietly into ruin. Even when the empire itself seems to have forgotten your name, the Battle of Callinicum arrives like a thunderclap, a brutal collision of wills beneath a sky scorched by relentless sun. You stand amid your forces, a patchwork of exhausted men and reluctant allies, facing the Sassanid army that seems as endless as the desert sands themselves. The fight is chaotic, a swirl of spears, dust, and the sharp clang of steel, and no one quite walks away unscathed. You lose the battle, or so the official accounts say. Yet somehow, it's also a kind of win. Your forces remain intact enough to fight another day. Your reputation muddied, but not destroyed. It's a confusing moment that leaves historians debating centuries later whether this was a tactical retreat or a Pyrrhic victory disguised as defeat. As the clash unfolds, you glimpse moments of strange resilience, a courier slipping through enemy lines with critical messages, the gleam of a soldier's battered shield reflecting the harsh sunlight, the smell of sweat and dust mingling with the faint scent of jasmine carried by the breeze. Quirky whispers persist about how you may have used secret Persian translators to feed disinformation, or how you might have bribed enemy officers with fine Byzantine silks. Nothing in this desert war is straightforward. The aftermath is grim. Your army's morale dips, and the Sassanids press their advantage. But the sheer toughness of your troops and your stubborn refusal to abandon the field keep the Eastern Front from collapsing entirely. It's a draw with heavy costs, a battle that neither side wants to claim fully. Scholars still argue whether your leadership here was genius under pressure, or simply stubborn pride, prolonging a doomed campaign. You know this fight is emblematic of the war's bigger picture, an exhausting back and forth with no clear end in sight, where every gain feels shadowed by loss, and the sands beneath your feet seem to swallow the future as much as the past. You return home to Constantinople, the city's great walls rising like silent sentinels against the darkening sky. But the welcome feels oddly hollow. The triumphs of Africa and Italy, the bold strikes and long sieges, seem to fade into whispers and shadows. The court is a maze of shifting alliances and forgotten glories, where your victories are brushed aside like dust on imperial marble. It's as if the empire itself is eager to forget the blood and sweat spilled to keep it whole. You trudge through gilded halls where past deeds are overshadowed by court intrigue, and the very air hums with whispered rumors questioning your loyalty and effectiveness. Amid this disheartening atmosphere, you cling to the fact that your campaigns did reclaim vital territories and stave off the Persian threat, for a time real. Tangible gains that saved the empire's heart from falling into ruin. Yet, the more you try to assert your role, the more you're met with cold suspicion. The court's politics are a different battlefield, and here you find yourself outmaneuvered more often than not. Historians still argue whether this was due to your own missteps or the empire's ingrained distrust of generals who grew too powerful. Meanwhile, a quirky rumor circulates that you attempted to bribe courtiers with exotic spices and silk, only to be met with polite smiles and icy refusals. It's a far cry from the open fields of battle, and you start to wonder if you belong in this palace at all. You watch from the shadows as your deeds are rewritten or forgotten, feeling the weight of an empire eager to move on without you. The dust settles, but the battle for recognition within these marble walls proves just as exhausting as any siege. The plague arrives like a silent thief in the night, creeping into Constantinople's crowded streets and palaces, turning vibrant life into a shadowy dance with death. You trudge through the sick and the dying, the air thick with the stench of rot and desperation. The empire, already battered by endless wars, now faces a new enemy. No sword can cut a microscopic terror that swells into a tidal wave of fear and grief. The bubonic plague doesn't discriminate rich or poor, noble or soldier, all fall victim to its merciless touch. Markets empty, churches overflow, and even the grandest halls echo with the coughing and moans of those clinging to life. This plague year feels like the empire itself is rotting from the inside out. Your role isn't just commander now. You become a reluctant caretaker of a city gasping for breath. You try to keep order, to stem the panic, but the invisible enemy has everyone on edge. Quirky whispers about herbal remedies, prayers to obscure saints, and the wearing of amulets swirl through the population, offering little real protection, but plenty of distraction. Historians still argue whether the plague hastened the empire's decline or merely exposed the cracks that were already there. You hear rumors some say the illness was a punishment for the empire's sins, others that it was spread intentionally by foreign enemies using poisons or curses. Either way, the death toll rises, and you stand amid it all, watching your city and your people succumb to an enemy you cannot fight with sword or strategy. You learn that surviving the plague is as much about endurance and luck as leadership. And as you move through the desolation, the weight of history settles heavier than any crown. Just when you think the Empire's troubles couldn't get any worse, whispers turn to accusations, and suddenly, you find yourself caught in Justinian's paranoid web. Being competent and loyal in these times is a dangerous mix, enough to make the emperor suspicious. You're accused of treason, a charge that could unravel everything you've fought for. The court's atmosphere thickens with intrigue and betrayal. Courtiers whisper behind closed doors, eyes darting with mistrust. You navigate this maze of politics with the careful step of a dancer on a knife's edge, where one false move means ruin. Your loyalty is questioned despite victories that saved the empire more than once, and you begin to see how power can turn friend against friend. The palace cat might be the only creature not plotting your downfall. Meanwhile, legends grow around your figure, some heroic, others shadowed with doubt. Quirky rumors suggest you use secret codes or magical signs to communicate with enemies, while your true intentions remain a subject for historians to debate. Historians still argue whether these accusations were founded or merely political theater designed to keep you in line. You face these trials not just with words, but with a quiet resilience, knowing that history often remembers the accused more vividly than the accusers. This phase in your life is less about battles with armies and more about surviving the venomous wars of suspicion and paranoia, where a dagger in the back might come from the throne itself. You learn that sometimes the fiercest battles are fought in shadows, with allies turning into adversaries, and trust becoming the rarest currency in the empire. The murmur grows louder, swirling into one of the most enduring mysteries of your life, the blinding rumor. Some say Emperor Justinian, in a fit of rage or cunning control, had you physically blinded. A cruel end for a once powerful general. Others claim it's merely a symbolic story, a metaphor for your political eclipse and fall from grace. You walk through these years shrouded in ambiguity, an enigmatic figure whose true fate is tangled in legends as much as facts. The empire's corridors echo with gossip, and chroniclers fill their pages with conflicting tales. You yourself remain stoic, enduring whatever darkness you face with a dignity that only deepens the myth around you. Oddly enough, some fringe historians speculate you may have kept a secret network of spies despite your alleged blindness, using whispers and signs to maintain influence. This theory adds a layer of intrigue. Was your downfall total? Or did you fight your battles from the shadows? Historians still argue whether Justinian truly ordered your blinding, or if the story was propaganda spun to discredit a once-feared rival. Your legend grows into a riddle wrapped in a cloak of imperial politics, leaving future generations puzzled and fascinated. Despite the uncertainty, one thing remains clear. Your fall marks the turning point of an empire grappling with internal decay and external threats. The loss of your public presence signals a shift, where loyalty becomes scarce and fear governs more than honor. You become a ghost haunting the memory of a once great empire, a reminder of how quickly power can turn to dust and how stories can blur the lines between fact and fiction. Retired but not broken, you find yourself stripped of armor and titles, watching the empire you fought for slip away like sand through trembling fingers. Life without command is a quiet kind of war. Each day, a battle against obscurity and fading relevance. You wear your dignity like an old, worn cloak, frayed but stubbornly intact, as you navigate the marble halls now colder and emptier than before. The once vibrant language of battle, replaced by whispers of betrayal and forgotten victories. You might not march armies anymore, but you still carry the weight of an empire's hopes and regrets on your shoulders. Oddly enough, there's a curious tradition that you take up in this exile. You begin using Greek exclusively, pioneering a subtle cultural shift that will outlast even your memory. Historians still argue whether this was a conscious political statement or just the comfort of a familiar tongue in uncertain times. Either way, it signals a subtle but seismic shift in the empire's identity, one that echoes louder than the clash of swords ever did. Meanwhile, you ponder your legacy in silent moments, aware that empires often forget their heroes once the dust settles. Amid these quiet days, you're visited by the occasional messenger, bearing news of distant battles or whispers of new threats, reminders that the empire you helped shape continues its relentless, restless march. Your role may have diminished, but your mind remains sharp, and your spirit, though tempered, is far from broken. The empire's story is still unfolding, and even from the sidelines, you're watching it with a keen eye, waiting for the moment you might be called once more. Despite the weariness etched into your bones and the brittle creak of old knees, you are summoned back one last time. The empire's aging warhorse called forth to stamp out a rebellion, threatening to unravel what little stability remains. You trudge forward, a veteran cloaked in the quiet dignity of countless battles. Your sharp wit, still your keenest weapon, amid a world grown stranger by the day. The streets you once knew pulse with uneasy whispers and the restless murmurs of a people fraying at the edges, caught between hope and despair. Your footsteps echo like a fading drumbeat in this twilight of empire. You find yourself balancing on the thin line between authority and irrelevance. Your commands, carrying the weight of history, but sometimes falling on tired ears. The rebellion is a knotty puzzle of old grievances and fresh betrayals, and your experience is tested against cunning younger foes who think in new ways. You deploy tactics honed over decades, blending force with negotiation, stubbornness with adaptability, but every move feels shadowed by the knowledge that the empire's glory days may never return. Still, you persist because that's what you do. Historians still debate the true impact of this final campaign, arguing whether it was a noble last stand or a futile gesture against an empire already in slow decline. Meanwhile, your mind drifts back to earlier days. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen, and you wonder if those memories are now more valuable than any victory. The empire may be slipping through fingers like sand, but your story, carved into its stones and scrolls, will endure as long as anyone remembers to read it. You return to Italy one last time, but the land is not the vibrant stage of conquest you once knew. Instead, it's a ghostly shadow of Rome's former glory, haunted by crumbling ruins and echoes of battles past. The city, the eternal city, feels more like a mausoleum than a throne. Its grand forums and temples reduced to skeletal remains that whisper stories of empires that dared to dream too big. As you step through its broken streets, you realize you're not marching into victory, but walking among the ghosts of a fading dream. Your heart aches at the contrast between what was and what remains. This isn't the Rome you fought for, no triumphant parades, nor cheers. Just the silent weight of loss pressing down. The Gothic War's aftermath lingers like a stubborn stain, and the scars on both land and people are deep. You're a relic in a land that has forgotten how to hope, but there's a stubborn resilience in you, a refusal to let this haunted carcass define your legacy entirely. In the quiet moments, you ponder the strange mix of fate and choice that brought you here. Historians still argue whether the decline was inevitable, or if different decisions might have turned the tide. Meanwhile, Local legends begin to grow around your name. Some paint you as a tragic hero, others as a ghostly figure doomed to wander between worlds. And so, amidst the rubble and shadows, you hold on to your sharp wit and steady resolve, reminding yourself that even in decay, there is a story worth telling. You head home, worn more by battles than by years, your body marked by scars that tell stories no coin could ever buy. Your return isn't the triumphant homecoming of a conquering hero, but a quiet arrival, greeted by whispers rather than applause. The Empire's grand halls may have moved on, but the people, those who remember, still carry your name with a mix of respect and reluctant gratitude. You become the general, no one deserved but many quietly needed. Your wealth isn't measured in gold or land, but in the loyalty earned through sweat, strategy, and sheer stubbornness. You carry the weight of countless campaigns, from the deserts where you outmaneuvered the Persians to the frozen marches through Gothic lands. The Empire's politics churn like a restless sea, and you navigate those waters with a wary eye, knowing every favor has its price. There's comfort in being remembered by the common folk, even if the Emperor's gaze has shifted elsewhere. Some tales exaggerate your deeds, others downplay them, but your legacy is a patchwork of myth and fact. Scholars still debate how much credit you truly deserve for the Empire's survival and revival. But one thing remains clear: your name survived the shifting tides of history, echoing in stories, whispered by soldiers and citizens alike. Even as time tries to erase you, your scars tell a tale of endurance and loyalty few can match. Your death arrives quietly, almost unnoticed, a soft closing of a long, worn chapter. Unlike the grand funerals of emperors or generals painted in gold and song, yours is marked by silence and speculation. No towering monuments, no throngs of mourners, just the gentle fading of a man who had seen too much to demand the world's applause. Scholars still wonder if you were buried with honor or simply left to rest in modest obscurity, a ghost in the empire you helped shape but never quite ruled. In the days leading to your final breath, memories crowd, your mind battles won and lost, friends betrayed and found, and the Empire's relentless cycle of rise and fall. You might have imagined a louder farewell, but the truth is that many great men disappear into the shadows when their stories become inconvenient or complicated. Even your closest allies could only offer whispers of praise. Fearing political tides, it's a reminder that history rarely writes the endings we expect. And sometimes, the quietest departures carry the loudest echoes. Historians still argue about your final years, and whether your fading was by choice or consequence. Did you step back willingly, tired of endless wars and palace intrigues, or were you quietly pushed aside regardless? Your legacy lingers in the cracks of Byzantine walls, in the languages that survived, and in the lessons carved by time. Your story is a testament to the fragile nature of power, memory, and the cost of holding on to an empire that could never fully be yours. As the empire settles into uneasy peace, your story begins to slow its pace, like the fading light at dusk. The battles, betrayals, and victories blur into soft echoes, and you find yourself watching from the edges rather than charging at the front. The weight of years pulls at your limbs, but your mind drifts gently through the memories, those sharp moments of triumph and the shadows of defeat. The empire, so vast and so brittle, shifts beneath your gaze like sand slipping through fingers, reminding you that nothing lasts forever. You remember the scent of the Mediterranean breeze on your face during campaigns, the clatter of hooves on dusty roads, and the quiet murmur of the Greek tongue rising as the new voice of the empire you helped reshape. There's a strange comfort in the continuity you forged, even if the empire would never be the same again. The language, the culture, and the scars you left behind whisper of change, a transformation that would echo through centuries. Historians debate how much credit you truly deserve for the empire's survival and revival. Were you the great restorer, or just the man who held the line long enough for others to build? The truth, as always, is somewhere in between, wrapped in the complexities of a world that rarely offers simple heroes or villains. Now, as you drift toward rest, imagine the empire's dust settling softly around you, the final breath of a chapter written in sweat, blood, and cautious hope. Your tale reminds us that even the mightiest empires return to dust, and that what truly endures are the stories we whisper in the quiet hours before sleep. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together.